Hi, everyone. I'm Marianne with Techcrunch. Here today we have Brynne from Habi and Ben from Clocktower Technology Ventures, and we're wanting to hear a little bit more about Habi, what it does, how it helps to democratize access to real estate in Latin America. So, Brynne, why don't we start out with the origin story of your company? I'd love to hear how you came up with the idea and what you do exactly.
Sure. It's great to be here, Marianne. Thank you very much for organizing this. And Ben, great to see you as always. So basically what we're building at Habi is a tech-driven real estate company that's focused on bringing information and liquidity to the residential market. And we're doing that by building out a full service platform that services all players in the ecosystem. So consumers, kind of buyers, owners, sellers, and renters, as well as brokers, banks, and builders or construction companies. Right now, we're really focused heavily in the consumer space and helping people get access to liquidity when they really need it in a market that has very little information, no MLS, and a very difficult time getting loans, which I can get into. The way that kind of Habi came about was I was born and raised in the States. I'd studied real estate undergrad at Wharton, and then worked in real estate investing for a few years at Goldman. Spent time at two different prop techs in the States, the second of which was really focused on mortgage origination. And then went to HBS. And when I graduated, I moved down to Bogota, Colombia for what I thought would probably be a 2-year fun adventure. And actually, from the minute I arrived, it became really obvious to me the pain points that existed in the residential space. It was almost impossible for me to find a place to live. My husband and I actually moved in with my mother-in-law so that we could be there and tour places in person because we couldn't get any sense of the types of options without being there on the ground. So obviously, then I went about my life. I joined McKinsey. I worked for a different startup, but I was always really focused on trying to solve the pain points that I had seen firsthand and recognized that the majority of Colombians probably felt more significantly than I had. Meanwhile, there was a lot happening in prop tech in developed markets like the United States and around the world, in Asia and in other parts of Latin America and in Europe. And I was always kind of keeping an eye on those developments and was like, if those things are working in markets like the US, where systems function pretty well, imagine what we do here, where, as I mentioned, there's no MLS. The vast majority of homes have no leverage on them whatsoever. In the top 5 cities of Colombia, for example, over 80% of the homes have no LTV on them. The average time on market to get to a purchase and sale agreement is between 8 and 10 months. And then you can have delays of 5 to 6 months before close and payment from a buyer and or bank. So I ended up partnering up with Sebastian Noguera. My co-founder is Colombian born and raised, is a former entrepreneur, having co-founded the largest online supermarket in Colombia. He also had experience bringing financial services online. He ran the digital transformation at the second largest bank in Colombia and brought the majority of their products online for the first time ever, built out the digital offerings of their retail sales and grew the channel of retail sales through digital from 3% of sales to 45% of sales in 1 year. So he's really a tremendous operator. And he considers himself an entrepreneur for life. So I kind of was like knocking on his door all the time, being like, I know you're going to start another business. Like, let's do it with me. Let's figure out something in real estate and we can build something amazing. So we decided to focus on the residential sector with the vision of this long-term platform where we could offer info and liquidity to every player in the ecosystem, and started in the transaction space. So the first product that we launched was in the iBuying space, similar to what you see in the United States with an Open Door or a Zillow Offers, where we would buy homes on balance sheet, renovate them, and sell them. And that's really meaningful for people who, in the market, as I said, it can take them a year and a half or more to get liquidity if they need it for selling their homes, and we can sign a purchase and sale agreement in 10 days. For buyers, it's great because we're a trusted counterparty. We help buyers get access to financing in a market that, as I mentioned, is very difficult to do. And the last thing I would say is we're tremendously focused on the middle class, like the vast majority of people who really feel the pain points of being traditionally underserved by institutions and not feeling empowered in some of the most significant financial decisions of their lives. So the price points that we transact in Colombia, which is our first and largest market, are really between $20,000 equivalent and $150,000 equivalent. 90% of the housing stock in the top 5 cities of Colombia is below $150,000. 98% of the housing stock is below $300,000. So that's really like the bread and butter of where we transact. About $40,000 to $50,000 is the vast majority of our business. We're now in 4 cities in Colombia, and we just launched Mexico City last week. And we're expanding into a couple of other products and services, again, with the aim of bringing information and liquidity. The second product that we launched is a free Zestimate tool, Zestimate-like tool that we call Habi Metro. That may sound really simple to people in markets like the US, where you're so used to knowing exactly what your home might be worth and what your friend's home is worth and what your mom's home is worth, what the person down the street's home is worth. There, you really have to understand that the vast majority of homes are not ever listed online. There's no available public information. The most common way to sell your home is to hang a big sign in the window that says your phone number. So giving people the information around what is going on with their wealth, how is what's happening in the neighborhood, what the trends are affecting that. If they were to rent the home, what would the yields that they could get be, is really powerful. And we provide that for free for everyone in the markets in which we operate. There are a few other products and services we're piloting, but that gives you kind of a sense of what we're building.
Would you say that you are creating an MLS of sorts that doesn't exist in these markets?
Yes.
And so you mentioned iBuying. How would you say what you're doing is different from iBuyers, say here in the US, and how is it similar?
So we look up a lot to the Open Doors of the world and Zillow, et cetera. I think they've done an amazing thing establishing this as an industry and showing that it can work for a certain percentage of sellers in the market. I think the fundamental difference is the fact that we operate in a market that doesn't have available information for everyone to run the pricing models off of. So the foundation of the company, which precedes any automated pricing models and the execution of the buying and selling, is the creation of a data asset which enables those pricing models to be accurate and relevant. And that's where I'd say that Habi has deep expertise and a true defensible advantage, where we've been able now to open 5 different cities that, while they're similar in some senses, obviously have different dynamics because every city is unique in the way that it's laid out, and kind of access every publicly available data source, set up partnerships with relevant players in the space, manually create data, and otherwise find ways to make it a kind of sustainable and ongoing source of data inputs such that we're able to run these really powerful and accurate pricing models.
So is it a long-term goal to expand all throughout Latin America?
The mission of Habi in kind of the medium-ish term is to serve all cities in Spanish-speaking Latin America with populations over 1 million people.
Let's talk a moment about how much you've raised since your inception.
Sure. On the equity side, we've been really lucky to partner with phenomenal investors like Ben, alongside others like SoftBank, who led our Series B, Inspired, who led our A, and Tiger, who has also invested in the last round, but was really significant in our seed round. And we to date have raised over $115 million in equity. On the debt side, we have also had a phenomenal partner and a number of partners locally, and we financed the acquisition of our homes at 100% loan to cost.
How many transactions would you say you've helped facilitate over the years?
I would say that we've had very significant growth. We've grown at about 35% month over month for the last 12 months in terms of transactions. And we've done transactions with thousands of families in Colombia.
Well, Ben, would love to hear directly from you. What impressed you about Habi?
Sure. Well, thanks for having us here today, and Brynne, it's always a pleasure. Marianne, I think for Clocktower, our goal is really to back the sort of brightest dreams of the best entrepreneurial talent we can find. And when we met Brynne and Sebas, it was incredibly clear that their vision was a really remarkable one, calling for a kind of empowerment of Spanish-speaking Latin Americans to be able to access housing in ways that historically had been challenging, given all of the market conditions that Brynne expressed, given this sort of fundamental lack of transparency in the market and lack of access to simple credit and transaction structures. So we believed, as I think Brynne and Sebas did, that the entire value chain of residential single-family real estate in Spanish-speaking Latin America was broken, and that they had a real clear vision of how to put it back together in a way that made sense for all the counterparties. And on the one hand, build really a tremendous business, but on the other, provide inclusion and access for millions of people that would be transformative and change their lives. And that's an incredibly appealing business. It was actually among the easier decisions we've ever made.
Well, I feel like there's been a growing number of prop techs in the region. What would you say is your biggest differentiator, Brynne?
I mean, I will go back to what I said before, which is the data and our expertise in creating this usable database and then running the pricing models off of it. We make the majority of our offers automatically. We do 100% of the evaluations automatically. And we're able to do that very effectively while still being profitable on a unit basis, which just shows kind of the power of that part of the team in a market that doesn't have that available. The other piece that I'll say to what Ben mentioned is a big piece of what makes it easy to recruit and makes it easy for me to work as hard as I do every day at Habi is that mission, which is fundamentally changing the financial stability and empowerment for millions of families, and that the business touches so many more than just the families who are buying and selling homes. But we work with 20 renovations companies who we've now been able to provide kind of a guaranteed number of renovations every single month. They're able to hire bigger teams. They're able to have more regular sustainable income. We have more than 400 active brokers on our broker platform. We make it easier for them to do their jobs because what was formerly an informal, really difficult market with kind of complicated assets to try to sell, in which the brokers were not exclusive, getting financing for the buyers was really hard, deals were hard to close. We provide them with a lot of an easier way, like tech tools, access to properties that are newly renovated, lien free, et cetera, easy to sell, assistance with financing, and we always pay market commission. So it feels really amazing to know you're changing the lives of all these people. And then if you unlock all of the wealth that's trapped in homes, as I said, 80% of the homes have no LTV on them whatsoever. You think about the many waves of that type of impact beyond the individuals. But if all of this liquidity is kind of unleashed into the market, how powerful that can be for other types of businesses.
Yeah, I think that is very powerful, and financial inclusion is definitely, it sounds like a big part of what you do and part of your mission. And I think I've mentioned this to you when we talked before. I feel like in Latin America that inclusion is a really big driver of innovation, even more so than here in the US, where I feel like it's more about disruption or making things better. Whereas in Latin America, it's very much more often about inclusion. Ben, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the wonderful things about being a fintech investor in this region is that most of what you're doing is, in some sense, financial inclusion. There's such a staggeringly large percentage of society that doesn't really have quality access to financial services, whether it's with respect to the real estate value chain or consumer credit or even just simple consumer banking or SME banking. And so what we often find in our Latin American activity is that you're typically dealing with an incumbent financial system that really serves only the extremely affluent, or a small sliver of the population. In the housing value chain, because of the sheer footprint of housing on GDP, the system does serve lots of people. It just does it very poorly. And so part of what we think is so interesting about Habi over time is that the totality of the value chain around real estate is up for grabs, and that Habi is going to be capable of building 5 different businesses that in the United States or in Europe you would think of as segregated, all packaged into one thing. And that actually makes the whole system work better for so many families, and should unlock actually a lot of efficiencies that will enable both incremental products but kind of novel experiences in Latin America that might actually lead to sort of new models that play back forward, we think, over time, into other jurisdictions. And that's part of what you can do when you're starting from a place of, hey, there's not good financial inclusion. You get to kind of reinvent it as you go along. You're not just going to copy what exists before. It's kind of the leapfrog from, hey, we never had landline phones, so we're just going to jump right to cellular phones. And there's different behavior patterns that you see in countries where that kind of infrastructure just vaults to the next phase. We think it's very much what Habi's doing in the single-family real estate value chain.
Brynne, is there any plans to move into different types of real estate down the line, or do you want to stay focused on single family?
So I just want to clarify with single family, we work a lot in developments of kind of 500 apartments in the few buildings. So it's not, when we think of like SFR in the United States, it's like you have specific homes, Phoenix style. We work in single family, but in the very dense cities that are Mexico City, Bogota, et cetera. We do not, in the short term, intend to move into multifamily, meaning kind of large rental, multifamily as an asset class. We're more focused on kind of using the ownership and rental of mom and pop or individual owners who are renting.
Okay, great. I think that we're kind of running out of time, and let's move to some Q&A from the audience. Thank you so much, though, Brynne and Ben. It's been awesome to hear about Habi, and Ben, why you think it's so awesome.
Thanks, Marianne. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Marianne, and of course, thank you, Ben Savage and Brynne McNulty. The audience has one question for you both. How tech is democratizing real estate, and which are the biggest challenges to create big opportunities for investors? Please, Brynne.
So I think that we're able to use technology to democratize the real estate market by giving access to liquidity to a lot more people and a lot more rapidly than otherwise would be possible, without the ability to gather and build these databases and run these automated pricing models so that we can do it at scale and touch the largest number of people. I mean, there's other ways in which we're doing it, which are tech enabled. For example, we did the largest loan issuance, crowdfunded debt issuance through the Bolsa de Valores in Colombia in the history of the country, with the idea being that we have a lot of the world's best investors who are participating and investing in Habi, but we wanted to open that up to everyday Colombians. And we have hundreds of Colombians from all over the country who are debt investors in us through the Bolsa de Valores. So we're using their new tech platforms to open up what used to be kind of exclusive for super high net worth individuals or institutions way to invest in the residential space in other ways.
Yeah, I would just say quickly, I think there's probably three dimensions that we tend to think about as risks and challenges. There's a data-centric technology risk, which is it's hard to manipulate data and do a great job of doing novel forms of underwriting that leverage data. The second thing is just regulatory. You're still doing somewhat innovative things, and you don't totally know where regulators are going to come out. So far, in general, in Latin America, the regulators have actually been very forward-looking in a really positive way, but that's an ongoing risk. And I think the third is just capital. The capital markets are surprisingly robust in these markets, but they're still not going to be as deep as they are in, say, the United States or Western Europe. I think what's interesting about Habi is on all three of these dimensions, Brynne and Sebas have really excelled and sort of demonstrated a capability to be superior across all three of these things, finding great ways to work with regulators, building a sort of world-class data architecture and infrastructure, and then really solving the capital issues. But as investors, most companies aren't going to be able to execute in that way. And so we tend to think carefully about those issues when looking at that space.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks, Brynne. Por supuesto, muchísimas gracias a Ben Savage y a Brynne McNulty Rojas, así como a la facilitadora Marianne Azebedo por estar en Finnosummit Connect 2021. Muchísimas gracias, ha sido un gusto. Hasta la próxima.
Gracias. Chao.